We're doing an expert league mock draft. Obviously, this is 10 teams. Unfortunately, we had some auto picks in here. For now, it looks like hopefully we can get this thing filled up. But we're going to be doing a 10-team mock draft. This is non-PPR, so you got to keep that in mind. So if you're looking for a PPR draft, this is not it. This will be a standard league draft. So my goal is to walk through pick by pick and tell you guys if I agree with the picks, think they were reaches, etc. So with this league, there's a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, a defense, and a kicker, which if you know I hate defenses and kickers, they're probably going to be my last picks, but we're going to take them in this draft. And I want to take a look at the ADPs, right? Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different. Running backs are going to be higher in a standard league. There's less receivers, so the importance of running backs actually comes to the forefront here. So I'm going to go through and go, like I said, pick by pick, and just kind of talk about just, you know, how I think each team is doing at the time. Going to go Christian Bijan. I think Bijan Robinson is I prefer Bijan over Breece Hall. And one of the things that I have to look for in this is the receptions, right? Normally in a league, I'm considering a Saquon Barkley or receiver here, but because this is a standard league, receptions are not as important. I'm going to go ahead and take Bijan Robinson, who has been talked up a lot by Raheem Morris. New coach said he wants to get the ball to Bijan early and often. And, you know, Breece Hall's a good pick too, but most of his value is tied to the receptions. At least it was last year. And so even with, you know, with the addition of Aaron Rodgers, there's still potential that Breece is going to have a lot of his value tied to receptions. We can see receivers went next, which is a good thing. Obviously, I want more receivers to go. I'll get value later. I'll get my running backs early. One question I always get, especially around this time when we're doing mock drafts, is like, what do you do first? Do you take running backs or do you take receivers? And I really think it depends on your league, right? At receiver, it's really deep this year, especially in a standard league. Like, you can get receivers later. We're talking guys that were like top 20 to 25 receivers last year going after the first 30 receivers. I've talked about it before, like a Calvin Ridley, a guy like George Pickens, who has a lot of upside, goes outside of the top 30. So I'm cool if everybody wants to start going receiver early, especially in this format. I'll load up at the running back position. You could start one at flex, and you only have to start 2 receivers. So for me, I'm going to keep going until I notice that there's not a lot of starting caliber running backs left, and then I'll start going for the receivers. Like, to me, one of the picks that I'm probably going to make coming up here is Derrick Henry. In a standard league, you want guys that score touchdowns, and the yardage matters more than reception. So you can see his projected points down here, 203, right? That's just projected points, but it's much different than all the rest. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind when you're going through your mock draft, is know your settings, know your league rules. Now, a lot of people are probably scared of Derrick Henry, but for me, I saw what Gus Edwards did last year. Gus Edwards went crazy last year. And, you know, for me, I think if we got Gus Edwards being a top 20 running back, we can get Derrick Henry being that. Somebody else noticed the exact same thing and went Derrick Henry. So I'm going to continue to go running back here, though. I'm going to grab Joe Mixon, and I think he's going to play a really good role for this Houston team. I wanted to get Derrick Henry, but I'll go with Joe Mixon for now. Alvin Kamara would be the next pick. So we have ETN go, Puka go. Yeah, I'm going to go with Kamara, even though Kamara is a little bit reception dependent too. I kind of like Kenneth Walker in this format. And I think we're starting to get a little too low here. I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker here, actually, over Alvin Kamara. No, I'm going Alvin Kamara. I'm going Alvin Kamara. I keep taking Alvin Kamara in all these damn drafts. But I love the running back situation I have right now. Bijan Robinson, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara. Another thing about the running back position is that a lot of people realize that it's a vulnerable position, right, where there's a lot of injuries. And if you're able to stack up on elite talent during bye weeks and during any type of injuries you have, now you have another elite asset there. So I don't mind loading up on running backs in standard formats, especially lower amounts of teams, right? With only 10 teams, you want to get elite talent. And I think I could find some receivers that are comparable to the Puka Nakuas, the Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, at least for this season. So I think once the running back position starts getting watered down, it becomes really hard to find consistent guys. So um, I love the position that we're in right now, coming off the number 2 pick. And this is a lot different. If you watch me do any other mock drafts this season, this is a lot different than how I would draft in those. I'm targeting the running back position a lot earlier in your standard formats. And this is purely a strategy play. Purely a strategy play. We also have room for, it looks like 7 bench spots here. So I love to continue to stack up, especially in thinner leagues, right? So if you have a 10-team league and you're wondering, the nature of how you should draft your depth, right? It's really easy to go through and say, you know what? I want to make sure I have a starter at every position. So I'll get my quarterback. I have my 2 receivers. Your team looks set. But in reality, the guy you draft in the 7th round versus the 11th round isn't going to be a huge difference when it comes to point totals, right? Obviously, talent will be different, but if you have a quarterback go down, it's easier to replace a quarterback in a 10-team league. There's 20 quarterbacks you would feel comfortable starting. And as we saw last year with guys like Brock Purdy, Tua, Jordan Love, we can find quarterbacks that finish. Jared Goff is another one. We can find quarterbacks that finish in the top 10. It's tough to find running backs and wide receivers and starters on a consistent basis, especially because those positions tend to get injured a lot more frequently. Last year was a little different, right? We had some quarterbacks go down, a lot of quarterbacks go down, actually. And we did see some surprises at running back and wide receiver when you talk about guys like Kyron Williams. We talk about guys like Ipuka Nakua. We had Sam Laporta at tight end. So there was some outliers there, but that's not typical. So it's always good to kind of evaluate where you're at in the process. All right. So we've seen a lot of receivers go. Most of the good running backs have already gone. So we're looking at like Jonathan Brooks is way up here for some reason. I still like a couple guys down here. Najee Harris, Aaron Jones should still be another good one. Zamir White should be a good play. Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams. So there's some good talent a little bit lower. I'm going to continue to look at wide receiver here. Brandon Ayuk, man, I don't know how he's still available, but guys like Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp is probably going to be a play of mine too. I'm going to get Ayuk right now, and I'm going to hope that Tyler doesn't take Cooper Kupp. I'm going to try to have Ayuk and Cooper Kupp here back to back. We'll see what he does. T. Higgins and Michael Pittman, perfect. That leaves me with Cooper, Calvin Ridley, and Diggs. I'll take my chances with Cooper Kupp this year. I think he has a bounce back season. So we're walking with Bijan Robinson, Joe Mixon, Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, and Alvin Kamara. I feel really good about the situation right now. And I feel like we got good receivers. There's more receivers down here. You talk about guys like George Pickens, Chris Godwin is down here. Upside of Christian Watson, the safety of Terry McLaurin. So a lot of still really good players down here that I would feel comfortable as bench options in a 10-team league. So let's continue to stack up. When it comes to quarterbacks, I don't know who has a quarterback already, but we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks already go. So even if I was one of the last to take a quarterback, Burrow, Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Dak, Jordan Love, that means my options of starting would be like Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, there's Justin Herbert, Jaden Daniels, who I really like as potential. So Trevor Lawrence, Tua, who was a top 10 quarterback last year. Jared Goff was a top 10 quarterback last year. That's why saying in 10-team leagues, don't be in such a hurry to have to find a quarterback. Like, you don't have to get a quarterback super early. The point differential between these guys, right? These are projected fantasy points, projections. Joe Burrow's at 278. I can come down here and get Deshaun. I'm not taking Deshaun Watson, but if I wanted to, Deshaun Watson's the point differential of a Trevor Lawrence is only 20 points. It's not that much. The difference in wide receivers and running backs, what we're talking right now, is going to be a lot more than that on a per starter basis. So that's where we're at here, especially because the position gets injured more. So I feel really good about the draft right now. It's going the way that I want to. I'd be targeting a guy like George Pickens or Chris Godwin or maybe even a Keenan Allen here. Keenan Allen's a little receptions heavy. And then when it comes to tight end, I've seen a lot go, but there's still a lot that I like. I really like Kincaid, Goddard, Pitts down here. So I feel good about any of those three when Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Laporta, and Kelsey have all gone, and George Kittle now. There's still a lot of tight ends that I trust out there. So I'm going to continue to load up on these flex positions, stay away from the younger players. I'm either looking at Chris Godwin right here or Najee Harris. I think I'm going to go Chris Godwin and then come back around and get Najee Harris. Let's go Chris Godwin. I like the pick there. I kind of like Keenan too. Don't trust him as much. Anthony Richardson just left. I actually like Anthony Richardson a lot too. But we're going to come down here, and I'm going to snag Najee Harris. And I think he has, for the value that we're getting, I think this is a good pick. I think it's a really good pick down here on your bench, a starting caliber type player who had a strong second half of the season. A lot of people don't like what they saw with Najee Harris last year, but a lot of that was baked into the first half of the season. He played much better in the second half of the year. So going through the strategy now, I have on my roster, right? I wish there was an easier. I hate the setup of this right now. But on my roster, you can see I'm loaded at running back, wide receiver. I got my flex, and I have good bench players. If I were to take a quarterback and tight end, right, if I would have taken one earlier, my bench would not be strong. And in fantasy, you always have to account for the fact that you're probably going to have one or two guys, the major pieces that you drafted, get hurt. So just take that into account as well. And there's still, in these 10-team leagues, there's a bunch of talent still here left in the 8th round right now. Guys that, have had starting caliber spots here for your team. So Tony Pollard was the RB14 in PPR formats. I'm not sure he was in standard formats last season. Javonte Williams, another player who we've seen be a top 15 type guy. Raheem Mostert was the league leader in touchdowns last year, along with Christian McCaffrey. So a bunch of viable options still here at the running back position. We're seeing a lot of starters go now, the Brian Robinson, Dave Montgomery. So this is about the range where you're going to start to get the last of the starting caliber running backs and receivers. All right, I'm on the clock. I'm going to get another running back here, Zamir White. Loading up in standard leagues on good starting caliber running backs. Never have too many in this format. And at the receiver position, I don't really see a whole lot here that I like as far as receivers go. If I was going to take one for upside, maybe I'm looking at like a Christian Watson or a Jaden Reed, Cortland Sutton. I really like JSN to have a bounce back this year. But I'm going to go to a different position now. I'm going to take another running back. I'm going to get Brock Purdy, actually. Let's go Brock Purdy. Take a strong starter. Brock Purdy was a top 10 guy last year. Should continue to be a good quarterback this year. So I'm glad I waited. He was the last of the starters that I really liked. Could have got a Tua, Trevor Lawrence I like. Kirk should be really solid this year, but I like getting a solid guy in Brock Purdy. Tight ends that are left, we got Kincaid, Dallas Goedert. So still not really worried about tight end. I might grab one here on my next pick if they don't get taken. How you guys like the draft so far? We got Brock Purdy, Bijan Robinson, Joe Mixon, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Alvin Kamara, Chris Godwin, Najee Harris, Zamir White. So we got some upside. Haven't taken a defense or a kicker yet. Do not plan to. Absolutely do not plan to. At least till the very end. At least until the very end. So we lost a couple of our tight ends that we were looking at. Dallas Goedert went, and Dalton Kincaid went. Brock Bowers went. So the last one really that I really like is Dalton Schultz. I feel like he is startable. I was hoping to get Dallas Goedert, but he didn't make it all the way back. So hopefully we can get Dalton Schultz here, and we don't get stuck in bad tight end land. A lot of the running backs I like just went Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams. So it's good to know there. I'm going to go with Dalton Schultz here. I like what he did. And the only thing I don't like is we have Joe Mixon. So I'm trying to think of like who I have teammate-wise to. Both are red zone guys. I don't mind it. Let's go Dalton Schultz here. If I want a little bit more upside, maybe a Taysom Hill, who always gives you random points. But that's about where I'd stop. All right. And we have some reliable guys. Nick Chubb here, who's coming back from the injury. I don't think it's a bad pick here in the 10th round. I just think we can find better value with either Tajay Spears, Raheem Mostert, Gus Edwards, or maybe even a receiver right now. I think this is the time for me to take a guy that I really like in Jackson Smith and Jigba. Get some upside since we have such good floor players already. This gives us a chance to earn a little bit more upside in the lineup. Could have went with the rookie. I get it. Rome Odunze, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, some good Brian Thomas, some good rookies there. And I'm sure one of them will do well. But it's good to get a player like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was a first-round pick last year. Very similar type upside. And so even down here, these rankings are a lot different on each site. So if you were to draft this on Sleeper, you might find some players who are down here who wouldn't typically be, right? Like a Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas, they might go a little earlier on Sleeper. And then if you draft on Yahoo, they might be a little bit different as well. So just depends on the format. Got to make sure that you're paying attention to your rules and what everybody else is doing in your league. So make sure if people are reaching on players, you got to know how to adjust on that. And if they're, going according to ADP, it gives you a chance to find some value as well. I'm surprised none of the auto picks have been defenses or kickers. I was expecting that. And typically in your drafts, your 10-team drafts, you're going to get that. So thankfully, this is an expert mock draft. You might try one of the beginner mock drafts. You might get some different luck. But for me, this is a good situation where they're drafting kind of how I would expect most expert leagues to draft. Defenses and kickers, absolutely less. Some upside here. I think Austin Eckler has some upside. Antonio Gibson has some upside here at the running back position. We got a ton of running backs already. I'm going to look to add one more receiver because I like the picks we already have. I could get a backup quarterback, but I feel like we can find a backup quarterback almost last in our draft. And I'm even okay with you not drafting a defense and a kicker at all. You can pick one up before the season starts. I'm 100% okay with that if you're an expert or a high-level player. I'm going to take Jameson Williams for some added upside. And then I'm also going to grab TJ Hawkinson, who's expected to come back later. I think there's some other players here, but TJ Hawkinson probably going to qualify for an IR spot. Getting him one of the last picks. I don't normally like taking two tight ends, but this is a guy that might come back later in the year, midseason. We can get some upside with a high-level tight end late in the draft. Quarterbacks, yeah. See, even quarterbacks, we maybe even could have waited on quarterback. We have Trevor Lawrence, who I trust, Tua, who I trust, Jared Goff, who I fully trust. Stafford is a trustable quarterback. We might have been able to even wait. Baker Mayfield played really well last year. Russell Wilson has seen good days, and if he can maintain the starting job and hold off Justin Fields, he could be a decent play this season, at least for the time that he's a starter. Deshaun Watson, we're going to get incredible value on this year if you do like taking the player like Deshaun Watson. A lot of options. So right now we have 3 more players left to draft. One of them is going to be a defense. One of them will be a kicker. I will take a kicker and a defense. I will. And we also need one more position. Another quarterback. And I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence, so I think he'll have a bounce back season this year. So now we can't take any more quarterbacks. We have to take a defense and a kicker. And as far as kickers go, I mean, you got to take the GOAT kicker, right? Justin Tucker. As far as defenses, there's going to be some really improved defenses this year. What I tend to look at when it comes to picking fantasy defenses is which defenses can score touchdowns, which ones get a lot of sacks, and which ones are going to be in divisions where there's not a lot of offense. So one of the improved defenses for last year was the Houston Texans, and they made a lot of good signings this offseason. I think the Houston Texans is a defense I'll be targeting. The Philadelphia Eagles have typically had a really good defense. The Patriots under Bill Belichick always had a good defense. I'm not sure that remains. The Falcons have a nice underrated defense this year. So I'm always looking for underrated defenses that can make an impact. And for me, hopefully I can find one of these. The Texans is a defense I think we'll have some fun with this season, especially under D'Amico Ryans. They looked much improved last year. Will Anderson another year there. Their corners are elite. I think this could be a fun defense. Saints defense is always good. Bengals defense is okay. Chiefs defense is good. Bears defense can be a lot improved as well this season. But I'm going to go with the Houston Texans, make my pick, and we are done. So here's the team. We got Bijan, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp at the receiver position. We got Chris Godwin, Najee Harris, Zamir White to have to start the bench, Brock Purdy as our quarterback, Dalton Schultz, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Jameson Williams there to give us some other options that are startable options. TJ Hawkinson and Trevor Lawrence as backups for the quarterback and tight end position. And then at kicker, got Justin Tucker, part of a nice high-powered Baltimore Ravens offense. And then the Texans defense, who should be improved and continue to provide good value. So let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like the team? You didn't like the team? Do you like ESPN? Let me know your guys' thoughts on the draft.